All right, welcome to Getting Started with Python for Test Automation, Week 6. Today we're going to go over Selenium WebDriver, introduce that. We're going to talk more about classes, packages, importing modules. A lot to do. I don't know if we're going to get through it all, but let's hop in really quick. First thing we want to do is we want to install Selenium. Now, on our first week, I think I introduced pip, right? We did pip install IPython. Pip is the Python package installer, or maybe it's the package installer for Python, whatever. So the way you do that is just do pip install from your command line on Windows, Mac, or Linux. Pip install Selenium. And I think I've probably got it all. Oh, I don't have it installed because I have a new virtual environment for Python. Now, virtual environments allow you to have multiple different versions of Python or just different collections of packages for the same version of Python, which is really handy for testing deployments across different systems. Once Selenium is installed, so let's go ahead and bring up our interactive Python shell. So IPython in my case, but if you don't have IPython, you can just type Python at the command line and it works the same way. So to test that out, we want to do from Selenium import WebDriver. And if that works, then you're good. Let's see if there's like a version on WebDriver. WebDriver underscore version, yeah. So I'm just typing in my interactive Python WebDriver dot double underscore version, or dunder version as they call it, 4.21.1, and that's the latest version of Selenium. Let's go ahead and I want to bring up Selenium just briefly here and just go to selenium.dev, which is the home site. It used to be seleniumhq.org. Selenium conference is looks like it's coming up June 21st. My talk did not get accepted to Selenium conference, but I found out this morning also that I've been asked to present a talk at the QA or the Highway Test Conference on June 21st in Columbus, Ohio. So a little bit there. Anyway, so it talks about Selenium WebDriver, Selenium IDE, and Selenium Grid. Selenium is an automation tool. Its job is to drive the browser to automate clicks and typing and all sorts of navigation that you do with the browser. It is primarily used for testing, but Selenium can also be used for web scraping or process automation, like automating tasks, filling out forms, or whatever that you need to do. Anyway, Selenium Dev is the website. For more information, you can go to download Selenium directly. There's bindings for different languages: C#, Ruby, Java, which is probably the most popular, Python, what we're losing, and JavaScript. Although in JavaScript land, most people use WebDriver IO or some third-party version of Selenium. Now, let's talk about the different tools. Selenium WebDriver is the library that we see for each of those programming languages. It is a client-server architecture. It's a web service. Literally, Selenium sends REST API calls to a server, the server being the Selenium server or the Selenium grid. But also, there are Selenium servers specifically for the browsers. For instance, Chrome has a tool called Chrome Driver. And Chrome Driver is a Selenium server. It's maintained by the Chrome team at Google, and it knows how to interact with Selenium. So when you're writing Selenium code on your client, you're actually interacting with a web service that knows how to communicate with the browser. All right, Selenium Grid, I'm going to jump over Selenium IDE really quick here. Selenium Grid is a way to build a distributed grid or cluster of Selenium servers running different browsers. So you might have a Selenium grid that runs Chrome, that runs Microsoft Edge, that runs Safari and Firefox, or it might run multiple versions of each browser. It might also run mobile services for Appium. Appium is based on Selenium WebDriver, but it's a tool for automating specifically mobile applications. So if you want to develop for iPhone, iOS, or Android devices, you can test those native apps using Appium, which is based on the WebDriver protocol. So if you know Selenium, you know half of what's needed for Appium for app testing. Now, there are some other tools that compete with Selenium, the most popular of which you've probably heard of might be Cypress, which is a web automation testing tool based in JavaScript using the Chrome WebDriver protocol, or the Chrome DevTools protocol, I should say. And when I talk about Chrome DevTools, I mean if you go to Chrome and you go to More Tools, Developer Tools, you may have seen this. Chrome Developer Tools allows you to see the elements on the page, and you can see as I click through here, it highlights different elements. It has a JavaScript console, so I could actually do console.log, which is the JavaScript equivalent of print. And I can actually run JavaScript programs right there in the browser. And it has other things like a network tab. So if I load a page, I can see all the different files that are loading, fonts and images and data, and of course the HTML pages as well, and JavaScript that might run on that page. And there are things like ability to do performance and memory analysis. Lighthouse is a performance tool. And there are other things that can be installed in the Chrome DevTools. Another tool that used to be pretty common was Firefox. What was it called? Firebug was the Firefox equivalent of Chrome DevTools before any browser had developer tools. Chrome has an API, or an application programming interface, to DevTools that knows how to interact with the browser, everything from what files downloaded to the HTML source. And that Chrome DevTools protocol is how Cypress or Playwright, another popular alternative to Selenium, communicate with the tests. You can call the Chrome DevTools protocol directly, or in the case of Chrome Driver, remember Chrome Driver is the instance of a Selenium server that's specific to Chrome. And Chrome Driver speaks, of course, using the Chrome DevTools protocol, or the CDP as well. So there's multiple layers. We don't need to get too much into the architecture, but I wanted to introduce it a little bit before we jump in to what we're doing. Anyway, so Python Selenium package installs Selenium WebDriver. Now, just one more bit of trivia is that Selenium was the original project developed by Jason Huggins originally to automate browsers, and another tool was called WebDriver, which was developed by Simon Stewart while he was working at Google, as well as a bunch of team at Google worked on WebDriver. The projects merged, I want to say, around 2008. I'm not sure. And so you often hear Selenium WebDriver or Selenium or WebDriver used interchangeably. WebDriver specifically is the WebDriver protocol. That user, or that developer interface, I should say, kind of won out in popularity versus the old Selenium interface. So that's how we work with it. Selenium WebDriver, you can probably consider them used interchangeably, and specific instances of the WebDriver are like the Chrome driver, or what's it called for Firefox? I can't remember. The Gecko driver, Gecko being the rendering engine for Firefox, or Edge driver, or Safari driver, right? Those are instances of WebDriver. And that's all very interesting. But let's start off. I'm going to exit out of my Python because I love my IPython interface, right? So I can even do pip install Selenium here, and it says requirement already satisfied, but we're good. We've got Selenium installed, and let's open a browser, right? So what I want to do is I want to do from Selenium import WebDriver. And if you don't want to use the IPython or the interactive Python shell, you can go ahead and hop into here, and I just want to create a file, new file. And let's call it hello Selenium.py. All right, so let's start off with a print. Hello, we're going to use Selenium. Right, so we can print that, we can run that file, and it says hello. We're going to use Selenium. I'm not going to do that over here, but I'm just doing from Selenium import WebDriver in my interface. But I just wanted to show you. You can go over here and let's throw that away. And I'm going to do from Selenium import WebDriver in my Visual Studio Code, just like I will in my IPython. So follow along. IPython is interactive. Every time I type a command and press enter, it executes that command. But over here, it's not interactive, which has some advantages in that if I make a typo, I can go back and edit it much easier, or I can rearrange the lines in my file. We often want to import things at the top of a file. It's just good practice. All right. So from Selenium, import WebDriver. This is really fun to do interactive, by the way, right? So I can say driver. Driver is my variable name. I can call it whatever I want. I can call it Tim. Let's call it driver though. Driver equals it's WebDriver.Chrome. So WebDriver is a package, and I'm going to hop over here and demonstrate this. So in my IDE, I can click on Selenium, and that'll take me to my root package, and it's this init.py. More on init.py. So you can see this starts with a bunch of documentation, or a bunch of comments for documentations. It talks about the license. Every line that starts with a hash or pound sign is a comment. Python ignores it. And look here, we can see the version is 4.19. So what this tells me is the version of Python and the version of Selenium installed is different on here than it is over here, right? So I can, because I didn't import Selenium directory. If I import Selenium directory, then I can do Selenium question, and I see the source. And I see the version is 4.21 here. What's happening is the version of Python used here is different than the version used here. Let's see if I can correct that. 3.12.3, okay. So if I do code dot from here, bring Visual Studio Code back over onto my screen. Selenium version, 4.21, 4.19, close enough. Primary differences are work with different versions of the browser. So starting over here, from Selenium, import WebDriver. All right, so now I have driver equals WebDriver dot, and now I want to see the options. I hit dot and then tab in IPython. I can see there's Chrome, Edge, Firefox service, right? All of these different options. I'm just going to use Chrome. That's my main browser. Well, Brave is my main browser, but it's Chrome based. So I just do WebDriver. This is my module dot Chrome. This is the constructor or the class, and we can see that happening. I wanted to show you here in WebDriver before I got distracted. We can see here from Chrome WebDriver, import WebDriver as Chrome. So this is what I'm looking at, right? Class WebDriver extends Chromium driver. So we can see up here we are from Selenium WebDriver, Chromium WebDriver, import Chromium driver. This is how we're importing Chromium driver. Now, when you create a class, you do not have to have parentheses, but you can pass an argument to a class, and that argument is the base class for inheritance. We're not going to go into that, and I know I'm going into the deep end looking at the Selenium WebDriver source code and talking about how it's imported. Don't worry, we'll get to the fun stuff later. But this will help you out years from now when you actually need to get in and debug Selenium and become a contributor. All right, so that's what we're doing, right? In here, we do driver equals WebDriver.Chrome, and we're calling the constructor on this Chrome class, which as we saw is an alias for blah 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 dot chrome dot WebDriver. So WebDriver is the package here that we were just in, or the module, I should say, and Chrome is the class. We call its constructor, and bada boom, it crashed. The Chrome driver version 104 detected in path might not be okay. So what's happening here is this is saying that I have a Chrome driver version that is very old, 104. That's probably from a year or so ago, year or two. But the Chrome version I have is 125. So going over here to Chrome, you can check out your Chrome version. You go to, let's see, help, about Google Chrome, and it will say, is it going to update to 126? But anyway, version 125 dot blah, 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 blah. So I know I have Chrome version 125, but I don't have the right version of Chrome driver. That's easy enough to fix. So I can either update Chrome driver, and I can do that. Brew will update work, or we'll try that out. I need to open in a regular command window. Now on Mac and Linux, brew or homebrew will work. On Windows it won't. Nope. So I guess I want to do brew install Chrome driver. So brew install Chrome driver, homebrew auto updates. Might be useful. So now it's going and it's downloading the latest version of Chrome driver. Well, that's looking for that. I'll show you where you can manually get Chrome driver. You just type into Google Chrome driver, back to our Google downloads. Secondly, so we can see the latest version they have is Chrome driver 114 for Chrome 114. If you are using Chrome version 115 or newer, consult the Chrome for Testing dashboard. Chrome for Testing here is available for version 125. And I can download Chrome for Mac ARM and Chrome driver for Mac ARM, blah, blah, blah. I can actually just download this directly. We're not going to do that, right? I've got Homebrew installing it in the background. So now if I type Chrome driver in my command window, -V, it'll show I have Chrome driver 125. I could also do brew uninstall Chrome driver and let Selenium install it for me, which is probably, now if I type Chrome driver, command not found. If I go over here, and I do driver equals WebDriver Chrome, now it's going to take a while because it's actually downloading Chrome driver and putting it in my cached directory. So the next thing I want to do here, I want to run my browser alongside my terminal. We can go to okay, so this version of Chrome is not, this is the version I'm using as a normal user, right? I can also, what happened was it launched off screen this other version of Chrome, and it says it's being controlled by automated test software. Guess what that test software is? It's Selenium. So now I've got this driver object, right? And I just typed driver in my IPython, and driver is an instance of Selenium WebDriver Chrome WebDriver.WebDriver. This is the class that's aliased as Chrome in my Selenium WebDriver module. Getting very technical here. You don't need to know this. What you do know is I have a variable called driver that I created with this driver equals WebDriver.Chrome. And I can interact with this variable. I can do driver dot, let's see if there's a version. There is not. But Selenium had a version, for example. All right. I'm definitely all over the map. What I want to do now, I've got a browser that was open here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do driver.quit with parentheses. So I called the function or method quit on the variable, which is an instance of my WebDriver class. It's an object. So starting over, I'm going to do driver equals WebDriver.chrome. We're going to launch that here, and you can see it comes up. It wasn't quite positioned correctly. I can position my browser. I can do driver.maximize window, and it actually comes full screen. You can see it's even behind my browser. I can do driver.window, I believe. Nope, that's window handles. I thought there was driver.manage. I'm thinking in Java right now. Let's look at all of our methods. I want to resize the window. Is it set window size? Sure is. So let's start with set window position, right? Let's set window size. Okay. Set window size takes a width, a height, and a window handle, which is a string. Here, let's spread this out so we can see it. So set window size is my function I'm calling on my driver object. Takes width, height, and window handle. If you remember from last week, window handle equals current. That's the default value. And it default returns none. So I can do driver.setWindowSize, call my function parameters, and I can say I want it to be 1000 pixels wide by 800 pixels tall. And we can see it resize that. Let's go ahead and mess around with this a little bit. Let's see if we make it 800 high by 1000 tall. Will that make it fit? That's pretty close. I think we can probably go, let's go 900 by 1100. That's getting better. It looks like 1100 is pretty close. And then I can also do driver.setWindowPosition. Set window position. Question mark in IPython, I don't need it. Well, I can do the question mark. Shows me the documentation. Sets the XY position with window move to, and the arguments are X and Y, the X and Y coordinates. So I can set window position, driver set window position. I can set 0, 0, which would be the top left corner. It actually moved it off screen for me because I have multiple screens. If you don't believe me, here it is over here. All right, I probably broke my computer here. No, I just unplugged it. So I'm just going to drag this back over here. Going to increase my font size. And now we're done playing around with moving the window. Let's do something. So if I want to open a website, open a URL, I want to driver.get, and I'm going to go to training.oneshore.com. That's my own site where I have some old training courses available that I've done. So, oops, I need to type a full URL here, right? So let me bring up my other window here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to https training.oneshore.com. And you can see here, it's I used to teach test automation with Java, or testing web services with Python, for example. So those were courses you could sign up for once upon a time. And that's the website I want to go to. So let's say goodbye to this. And here's my automated test software, Selenium. And I want to get that URL as a string. And notice I had to just get the HTTPS part as well. And it looks like I've got an orphaned M there. So I call driver.get on my URL, and that works. I can also driver.get amazon.com, and it opens Amazon, which Amazon looks like it won't let me use Amazon unless I type a CAPTCHA or log in. I'm not going to do that, but I can go to google.com. or whatever site I want to go to. But I want to go to training.oneshore.com. Now, I'm on this site. I can do things like, I can say I don't know what URL I went to, or it redirected me to some other URL. What I did was driver.get https training.oneshore.com, and it loads that URL. I can actually do driver.title will show me the title, and it shows here OneShore training test page. And I can do driver.current URL, and it will tell me we're at training.oneshore.com. And let's see, what else can I do? I can do things like I can add cookies, go full screen. Current window handle, and that will just tell me idea. The reason for doing that is I can have multiple tabs, right? I can have Google in one tab and OneShore in the other tab. So it shows here that driver.get current window handle. If I go to if I go to the title, it says OneShore training. Test page. It's looking at this other tab. I want to switch tabs, right? So I want to do driver.window handles. And we can see we've got two. We've got this 8C1, which is the first tab. And then we've got this other one, 5B. And I can switch to this one here, this 5B. It's a string. Many people don't learn how to switch tabs until they've been using Selenium for months or even years. Wait a minute. Looks like I need to read my documentation. Switch to window. Okay, all right, so I forgot. Switch to .window. And now when I do driver.title, it shows Google. Do driver window handles, and I can switch. Notice how it doesn't visually change it back. So I'm going to switch back to my OneShore window. Make this a little bit bigger so that we see that it's not looping. And that time it actually did visually change. Oh, maybe it's because I was already switched. And we can see the title is OneShore training test page. The last thing I want to show before we actually learn how to interact with the page is I can do driver.page source. Okay, that's a little bit different than I was expecting. The page source, that shows me all of the HTML for my page. So you can see here it ends with /body/HTML. Now, there are three main commands that you need to know how to do with Selenium. You need to get a URL. You need to be able to find an element on the page. Like say we want to find, let's find this button for selecting time zone. And then the third thing we can do is we can interact with it. We can click on a button, we can type some text, we can click on a checkbox or unclick a checkbox. We can get the text of a particular element. We can clear a text field. But anyway, number one, going to URLs, that's driver.get. Number two, finding elements to interact with. And once we have an element to interact with, we can then do commands on that. Type or send keys, click, or whatever. So let's driver find element. This is the first thing we want to do, right? We want to find an element, and we want to find an element that's a button. I'm imagining there's only one button. Oh, there's two buttons on this page. So I can find an element button. Oops, and I want to actually do this. I'm going to make a variable called button. Driver find element button is going to return an element. So we've got button here. Looks like it didn't work. Invalid locator. Oh, because I didn't specify what type it is. So this is the next thing you need to know, is there are different strategies or ways that you can find an element. You can find an element by its tag name, like button or input or H1 or whatever. You can find it by a name. And let's go ahead and look at the page source. So I'm going to go to inspect, right click on that, and we can look at this page and we can see, let's make this bigger. All right, so I've got my page here, and I've got my page source that I'm looking at. When I'm inspecting the page source, I can see here, this is my heading, this is my, or this div with ID of heading has my logo. I have training test page is by H1 element. So you need to know HTML to some degree. Here's a P or paragraph element. Here's an H2 or a second level heading, an H3. And then I've got this form. I want to expand this form, and you can see I have in here, I have a div, and then I have, that's why I didn't find this button, because this is not a button, this is a select element. Now I'm going to get a stale element exception. And there's my JavaScript at the end. At the bottom I have a button, that's the sign up button. So I need to find an element by tag name is the way I want to do that. I could find it by ID, like ID equals heading. I can find it by name, that's this name attribute. I can find it by a link text, like contact me. I can find it by two different ways. One is called XPath, which stands for XML path. It's a way to search for a HTML because HTML is a subset of XML. Or I can use a CSS selector. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. There's probably a lot of things going on here that you may or may not know. Don't worry about it. So there's different ways of finding an element, right? So I can find element, and now I need to pass by whatever. So by.id is the default. But I can do by dot, I need to, from Selenium dot WebDriver dot common import by. Wait, is it dot common dot by? Yep. So by, right? There's by dot ID, by CSS selector, by class name, by link text. So by tag name is what we want to do first. So our first argument is by tag name, and we can see here our second element. So first argument is self. Self refers to the class itself. A function that has self is able to reference the class, be referenced by the class. By, we're doing by tag name, and then the value. So we need the tag name. So hopping back into our test, we want to pass by tag name as our first argument, and then we want to pass select as the element name. And that's here, this element right here. Select ID equals time zone. And then what we can do, I'm going to grab this and bring it into my interactive session. So I want to do driver, here what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it different. I'm going to do time zone equals driver.find element by tag name. Oops, I have to do from selenium.webdriver. This is the painful thing about Python. Driver.common.by import by. All right. Driver.find element by tag name and the tag name we want is select. Now, this returns a web element, but we can also just add a dot. And I'm going to call click. So I'm essentially going to do this. I'm going to click on that. Let's bring this down so we can see it happening side by side. And when I click enter, you can see it clicks. If I click it again, oh, it brings the focus to that. That's what's happening. So I bring it back over here. I can keep clicking that. A select, actually, I don't want to click on the select. I want to select an option within that Eastern, Central, Mountain, Pacific, IST, or whatever. Let's instead find an element by link text. So I want to find the contact me and click on that. You can see underline, it clicked it. Does this not do anything? Oh, it opened up an email form over here. Right. So we can click on a link. We can also click on a checkbox. Let's take a look at a checkbox. Say I want to do testing web services with Python. Now this is a common workflow, right? I want to find this checkbox. So I'm going to right click and go to inspect. Make this bigger. Let's try that again. So I want to do testing web service in Python. Inspect. So we've got an input of type checkbox, and it's called Python Web Services, the name. So let's find it by name instead this time. So we do driver.find element by name, and then the name is Python Web Services, and we can click that. Click is a function returned from, or a function exposed by web element, which find element returns. And so we can see it checked this box. We can click it again, and it'll uncheck it. So that's pretty cool. But what if we want to get all of our checkboxes? Well, we can do driver.find elements, plural, with an S. And then we'll go by, let's inspect this again, right click, inspect. And so we've got input type equals checkbox. So now I'm going to introduce you to a CSS selector. So by CSS selector, comma, and then this next argument is a string. And the CSS selectors, I can say input type equals checkbox. CSS selectors are their own little mini, almost a complete programming language. It might be Turing complete, but we'll learn more about CSS selectors in the future. Just know that this is a CSS selector. And we can see here that there are multiple, right? And it returns web element, web element, web element, web element, 5 web elements. And remember, underscore, if I return a value, find elements returns a value, but I didn't specify a variable name, that variable name, by default, the last thing returned is underscore. And so underscore is that same list of 5 web elements. But I can do better than that. So I'm going to do, oops. There we go. I can do checkboxes equals driver find elements by CSS selector. And I can do length of checkboxes. There's 5 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a pretty good test, right? If we were using PyTest, we could get the number of checkboxes, say we're expecting there to be 5 topics to choose from. And if it displays 5 topics on the page, passing test. All right. So we can find all those, and then we can do this. We can also do for checkbox in checkboxes. I bet you can guess what we're going to do. We can do checkbox.click. Now, checkboxes is just a list. So we're going through a list of checkboxes. The checkboxes are a Selenium web element object. The web element object has a function click. So we're going to run this and it checks them all. It unchecks the first one because it was already checked. We could even run that again. So let's try that again. For checkboxes and checkboxes, checkbox click. Reversed it by checking all the checkboxes. That's fun. Let's do it over and over again. Oops. Now, let's say we want to make sure that they're all checked. What I want to do is I want to check if it's checked. So for each checkbox, and let's click a couple here. Right on the training page, we're going to click a couple checkboxes. I want to print checkbox dot is selected, or is right. It's checked. And let's see. So I should see true, false, false. Let's try it out. Hey, true, false, false. That would make a good test too. We could actually verify that by default, the first one is selected and none of the others are selected, or whatever our case may be. We could assert on each of these. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that they're all checked. So what I want to do is if not checkbox is selected, here let's uncheck them all first. If checkbox is selected, then now notice we're nesting again. For checkbox and checkboxes, we indent. If checkbox is selected, we indent. That's the block of things that are going to happen. So we're going to print unchecking. And then let's add another thing, a feature, just to show you checkbox. Again, I'm giving you an intro to Selenium. You're probably not learning that much, but you're learning how it works. Checkbox dot, I need to figure out a way we can identify these. We can get the name. Get attribute. This is an attribute. Type is an attribute. Name is an attribute. So we can get Java Selenium or whatever, or Python web services, for example. Checkbox.get attribute. And the attribute we want to get is name. So if it's selected, we're going to print the name. Well, we're unchecking it, right? And then next thing we need to do is checkbox.click. So if it's already selected, we click on it and unselect it. And now we unclick it, we can see all 5 checkboxes are unchecked. Let's do the opposite, right? Now we can say if not checkbox is selected, and we'll say checking checkbox, checkbox click, and it checks them all. And we can see it checked them all. That would be a good test as well, if that was what we needed to test. All right, let's do one more thing and then take a couple of questions. We want to fill out this form. Going back over here, we want to find our form first, right? So let's inspect, right click, and we see input name equals name, and it also has an ID, so we can find it by ID. And the email address also has name equals email and ID equals email. So let's get the name and type something in there. So we do driver.find element. We'll do singular because we only want. We can do by name again. The name is, of course, name. And we can act on that web element. Let's create a variable for that. And let's call it name field. Now we can do driver dot, or wait, we can do name field dot text. I'm going to print the text. Print name field dot text. It's empty, but let's fill it out now. Name field dot, and then send keys, like type on the keyboard, send key presses. So send keys. My name is Aaron, and boom, it enters Aaron over here. Isn't that cool? I need a way to compromise that. I can see both my HTML, my web page, and my IPython form. So that's pretty cool. And I can do the same thing. I can do email field equals driver.find element. And I can do by name, but I can also do by ID. And by ID is email. I can do email field dot send keys. And I can do aaron@oneshore.com. It's actually aaron@oneshore.com for those who are curious. And it enters it there. And I can do name field dot text. It's going to get the text that I entered there. Let's try email field dot text. I probably need to find the element again. So email field dot text. Does it get text? Oh, by the way, remember by ID was the default. So if I'm using ID, then I can find the element. Why is it not getting my text? It should. Oh, I know why. Now, if I were to get my heading, I'm old today. You got to forgive me, guys. This field does not, let's inspect it. It does not have a text. It has a value. It's an input. There's no text, right? So this H2 element, we can, let's find our heading actually. So find by ID heading. So find element, and we're going to do heading. All right, so driver find element heading, text. Now this should say training test page. Doesn't do anything. All right, I'm baffled. I don't know why it's not getting the text, but let's hop back to getting our email. So I can get attribute value. And it shows my attribute value is Aaron at OneShore. And I can also clear that. I am baffled about that text. Not click, clear. Clear is another function I can perform on an element. And it clears my email address. The last thing I want to show you is driver.find element by XPath. Now this is just a quick introduction. We're going to learn more about XPath. I want to find, it starts with // That means start at the root of the document, right? The root of the document is right here, HTML, or the body. I want to find underneath the body, I want to find the form. And then under the form, I want to find a div and an input. But I'm going to do 2 slashes and say I want to find an input field. So I want to find this, and it will have 2 input fields, but it will also find my first input field. I can also do input ID equals name. I need quotes here. And I can call clear on that. Oh, I did click, not clear. Come on, guys, help me out. There we go, clear. All right, so this has been a whirlwind introduction to Selenium. Let's talk about what it does and what we've not learned but demonstrated today. Number one, Selenium WebDriver, available in many languages. It's a web service. It communicates client and server, so I can talk to actually a remote browser. I could have a browser in Texas, and if that web browser had a Selenium server exposed to the internet, I could manipulate that browser. So watch out, Robert. I can control your computer.
I always knew it.
If you set up a Selenium server on that computer, and the only thing I could actually control is the browser interaction for a WebDriver session that I start. There are things that allow you, of course, to remote control a computer, but that's beyond the scope of our class. Okay, I create a WebDriver instance by calling selenium.webdriver.chrome, right? Or in this case, Selenium WebDriver.chrome, because I did from Selenium import WebDriver. I could also just import directly Selenium, and I can say driver equals selenium.webdriver.firefox, and I can launch Firefox. Now again, it's downloading Firefox. It's remote, or it's downloading the Firefox driver, and here's Firefox. We can driver.get. Now this instance of driver is controlling Firefox instead of the other instance of driver I had, which was controlling Chrome. I can get a URL. I can find elements. And I can do by ID, email, and I can, so I can find an element that returns a web element object. And I can see that by doing type of email field. And here we go. That's the same thing we learned up here from the output. And once I have a web element, that web element it has many things I can do. I can click on a web element, I can clear it, I can send keys or type to it, I can check if it's selected or if it's enabled, like it's clickable. I can check if it's displayed or visible. I can get the text of it, theoretically. I can interact with it. I don't know why I can't get the text. And I can also, so I can send the keys and I can clear it. And I can also interact directly with the window. We saw how I was able to resize the window. And last of all, and maybe the most important, I can also quit, and that will close the browser down. All right, that's an introduction to Selenium. We're going to get into more detail, and we'll write a test using Selenium next week. Any questions or comments?
I'm good.
All right. How do you feel like that introduction? Was it?
This is very good.
Was it useful?
Yeah, very useful.
Were you able to follow along, or were you just kind of absorbing as you watched?
Currently, I'm just absorbing.
Okay, that's probably good for today. And that's all I really intended, is to give you a taste of it.
Sure.
Another thing you can do on your own, and this is a good exercise, is go to selenium.dev.
Okay.
And if you want to experience Selenium without learning how to program it, go to Selenium IDE and download that. That's a browser plugin, and you can actually click a record button, click on stuff on the web page, and it will record your interactions. So Selenium IDE is a great introduction to Selenium. It will teach you more about the Selenium commands, and as well as how you can find different things with those locators by XPath, by CSS, by ID, by link text, by tag name, and several others. So that's a good exercise if you want to do over the next week. Download Selenium IDE and just play with it. Go to your favorite website, go to the OneShore training test page if you want, and click around. All right, other than that, Have a good day. It's my birthday, so I'm gonna have a
Sure.
good evening myself.
Anyway, happy birthday to
All
you.
right, we'll see ya.
Okay.